Welcome to the Positive Pants Podcast. Mindset, motivation, and inspiration to help you find your positive pants. It's time to let go of negative thinking, understand why you do what you do, and stop the self-sabotage with your host, Fran Excel.
Welcome to the show. As always, it's Fran Excel, your resident subconscious success mentor, helping you find your very own pair of positive pants so you can get out of your own way and live a life that you love. If you want to stop sabotaging your own success and let go of the stress, then you are in the right place, my friend. Make sure you download your free Stressed to Success guided meditation at bit.ly/stressed to success as my little gift to you for being here. Please do subscribe, share, review. It really, really helps people that need to hear this message find us, and I so appreciate it. In the show notes, you will also find details of how you can work with me and where you can get your mitts on my meditations, products, and printables. You can also find it through the link in my bio on Instagram, which is my second favorite place to hang out. So please do come join me over there at I'm Fran Excel. Tag me in your takeaways, slide into my DMs. I am here for it. So that is the formalities over, my love. So let's jump into the content. Why is emotional regulation so important in business? It's fundamental because your emotions are a huge piece of the pie in terms of what drives your behavior. It's not just fundamental in business, let's be honest. It's a skill that is fundamental to your whole life. This is what I'm going to be talking about in depth in this week's SOS, Success Over Stress group program. So it's hugely important to understand our emotions and how it shapes our behavior and therefore our results. So your emotions create physiological, hormonal, psychological changes, and these influence your thoughts and behavior. Big news! But we're not actually taught how to handle our emotions or that we can really have any influence at all. We just kind of accept them or learn to suppress them. So we only really know what parents and primary caregivers taught us about emotional regulation. But what if they weren't really taught by their primary caregivers? You know, we hear a lot of things of like trying to stop you crying rather than just letting tears flow and, you know, being a good girl, all of these different things that are attached around our emotions. But the important thing here is to note also the generational differences we're essentially being taught. Yeah, emotional regulation of the time is what we're really being taught. So taking into account what was and wasn't acceptable in society at the time that your primary caregivers were brought up and their primary caregivers were brought up, right? Generational. So a huge amount of unconscious bias comes into the way that we're taught to be humans, essentially. If you want to understand more about unconscious bias, I did do an episode specifically around that back in 2020. So you can see how this cycle continues. You know, we keep teaching it to future generations. We kind of go through life suppressing emotions or letting them take over. This is the case for a lot of us. We might learn as children that it's not okay to feel or express our emotions. But even if you suppress them, they're still there. They will come out in other ways. But something that's also important to know is that you can't make good conscious decisions in the midst of an emotional hijack. And that could just be a heightened state of stress. Yeah. Making decisions is something we need to do all the time as a business owner. So it's not ideal if we can't regulate these things. Now, to be abundantly clear, all emotions are welcome. They're not to be demonized. They are helpful indicators. But if you don't know how to regulate them, you can get into a pickle. So think about a time in your business where something has happened and it's made you feel anxious or scared or frustrated. How did it feel? And how did it affect your ability to do things? You know, if it was a sympathetic nervous system response, so fight or flight, it might cause you to speed up, make mistakes, go into fight or flight, say something you didn't really mean, or make rash decisions. And if it's a parasympathetic nervous system response, it might cause you to freeze, people please, or not be able to do much of anything. A lot of procrastination comes through there. So the limbic system in the brain is your emotional brain. home to the amygdala, which is the fear center, the hippocampus, the memory center, and the hypothalamus, which regulates the autonomic nervous system and controls the endocrine or the hormone system. So cortisol, adrenaline, DHEA. So responsible for releasing the adrenaline and cortisol and for the fight or flight and rest and digest response. So all of these parts of the brain are talking to each other all the time. And there's something we call going limbic, which is where your limbic system totally overrides your prefrontal cortex, which is your higher level executive functioning. This is what we want to be working. It takes up a huge amount of energy, which is why your brain will always try and conserve it. But it is the higher level, the CEO of your brain. So when this happens, when this hijacking happens, your IQ literally lowers. And how do you think this affects your behavior in these moments? So as a business owner or in a high stress job where you're reacting all the time to potentially threatening, in inverted commas, stimuli, what do you think is going to happen? So some common things might be snapping, shouting, crying, lacking focus, taking things personally, blaming, lashing out. And emotional regulation is self-control and the ability to be able to bring yourself back into balance at will. So how do you regulate your emotions? I mean, there are a ton of ways. I've put 55 tools and techniques in the members area of the first round of SOS. And I know I'll be adding more as we go along. So think about what calms you down and gets you back on track. What works for you? That's why I've put so many tools in there, because it's a very individual experience. So there are cognitive tools like reframing, labeling, journaling, and there are somatic tools like breath work, heart math, movement. My favorites, I talk about these a lot actually. My favorites are always singing and dancing. Singing helps tone your vagus nerve, and the dancing also helps the emotions to move through you too, so you don't get stuck in an incomplete stress cycle. And it sounds so counterintuitive, I get it, to be in the midst of going limbic and then dancing or singing, but trust me, it works. This is why my SOS program even needs to exist, right? How does it feel to be hijacked by your emotions? You do things you wouldn't normally. You do things you regret. You can feel in a heightened state of panic or anxiety, and everything just kind of feels harder. But we don't have to be ruled by our emotions in this way. Meditation is another amazing emotional regulation tool. Mindfulness is operating that ability to command yourself. So taking you out of the limbic brain and waking up your prefrontal cortex so you can rationally think things through and make better decisions, which sounds much more enjoyable, right? Much better. So the other thing we need to be aware of is that emotions are contagious. So you've probably been around someone who's super stressed. And how do you feel? Even if you were joyful or calm before you got there. Yeah. And you've probably been around someone who's calm and patient. And how do you feel if you're emotionally hijacked and you're stressed out? How does that make you feel? It's emotional intelligence, right? Being able to recognize yours and other people's emotions, but they are contagious. So be conscious of who you're around. But self-awareness and self-regulation are two huge pieces of the puzzle. Think about it. If you have the ability to regulate your emotions, how different would it feel when you have setbacks, when people let you down, when a client doesn't treat you well, when you have to give a refund, when you feel like you're trying all the things, but you're not getting the results that you want yet, when you get a no, when something happens that you were totally unprepared for? How do all these things feel? Yeah. And think about what your normal reaction might be in those situations and compare it to what it might be like if you were able to regulate your emotions. Big difference, right? I believe the ability to recognize and regulate your emotions is paramount in living a life that you love, especially in running a business. But its very nature is stressful. Running a business, right? Because to do it, usually we have to go against so many of society's norms about what's safe and what's not. We go head to head with our own trauma. Our brain and our nervous system will fight us the whole way if we don't know how to help create ourselves a new baseline of safety. How many times have certain thoughts come up for you and stopped you in your tracks? The comparison, the I'm not good enough, the beliefs of it's not them, it's for them, not for me. Our ego playing hardball and trying to keep us in the familiar by sending us all this stuff. You don't know your way around this stuff, how to be present with your emotions, how not to demonize them and see them as messengers and indicators rather than something to be suppressed or denied, and how not to blame or shame yourself for your own emotions when it's part of being human. This is the work that's important in business and in life. You can have all the strategies in the world, and that's great, but not in isolation. You need to know that you can and learn how to work with your emotions and self-regulate. But this is a skill that you can learn. It's not your fault you haven't been taught it. It's absolutely something you can learn. Just make that your priority for a while and just see how the changes unfold.
So if you got value from this and you know in your gut that now is the time to step up and start rewiring your thinking and start changing things for yourself, then book in a free discovery call so we can work out what needs to happen to get you from where you're at right now to the action-taking success you know you can be. If you want my eyes and ears on your problems, then I work with people one-on-one and through my programs. You can find all the details to book in a call in the show notes, the link in my bio on Instagram and on my website, franexcel.com. So stop waiting for if and when and choose to change things now, because you 100% can. I am here to believe in you when you don't believe in yourself. And as always, I hope you found this helpful, and I will see you next week. Bye.